Do they go in? Do they come in through the ports? Which agencies of government are at the ports that are supposed to be monitoring and enforcing and ensuring that only licensed companies bring in these drugs, and they bring in only the drugs that they are required to bring in line with laid down rules and procedures. In situations where they already found their way into the warehouses and they're only meters or maybe few kilometers away to the counter, then people are at risk, particularly those that were sparing a thought for during this Yuletide and hoping for quick recovery. There must be a better way to do things.
Perhaps one of those better ways would be to even ask those questions you're asking. How did they get in?
In the first place.
There are those who would point to immigration, who would point to customs, who would point to various agencies of government that have those primary responsibilities, Standards Organization of Nigeria, and the rest of them. So how did they get in the first place? This is the process of eliminating these counterfeit drugs from the everywhere. We also hear medical practitioners say that some medications, once they say, okay, it's expired, it still lasts for X number of days, weeks, or months. But the question you want to ask is how many people are aware of that particular thing? So NAFDAC is doing this one now. What's the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria saying about this? What's the NMA itself, saying about this? These things, I'm pretty sure, are not unknown to the entire medical ecosystem in Nigeria. And I also always talk about communication, guys. Many people are not aware of several things. The doctor prescribes. In fact, it's at the dispensary that you get the drugs at the general hospital. Is it expired? Is it still, valid? How do we ensure? How do people know the right things about, all of this information? So NAFDAC is going about these to the shops. Where else should NAFDAC be going? I don't know if you have had any such experience you want to share with us this morning. The emails are right there on your screen. Neota Chamberlain.
I was just running through the timelines. I and Book, you guys hit it smack on the head. I was just running through the timeline, so let me just run through. So sometime in the month of October of 2022, NAFDAC seized unregistered products worth about 1 million in Kaduna. In February 2023, they destroyed fake products worth 326 million in Nasarawa. In July, they seized products worth 45 million from outlets. Same month of, in April, the customs handed over to NAFDAC about 1.4 billion naira worth of seized drugs to NAFDAC. In July of 2023, NAFDAC raids outlets, seizes products worth 10 million. Same July, NAFDAC seized products worth 45 million. July again, NAFDAC seized products in the FCT worth 45 million. Okay, that's about the same thing. In October, NAFDAC seized adulterated products and foods worth 535 million. That's in the month of October. In August, unregistered products worth 15 million in Niger. It's, I don't know, growing up, we heard of things like dispensary. I mentioned going to the dispensary to get the medicine to the hospital, or going to the pharmacy, registered pharmacy. Indeed, if you've gotten your you've seen a doctor, medical personnel, they recommend certain medications for you. You go to the dispensary in the hospital to get that. And if it is not there, you go to a registered pharmacy. And most times, those pharmacies are not too far from the dispensary or from the community health center where you go to. And that was when those primary healthcare centers in the rural communities were working. But see what happened. After a while, that began to decline, and then we began to see a spread of pharmacies around the rural communities. And you get there, they even call the pharmacist doctor, because the man in that rural area says, this person knows I'm having these symptoms, and he gave me something that gave me relief 2 weeks ago. So he tells the next man, who tells the next man, who tells the next man. And that doctor in the community is feeling cool. So he goes on to get more of those medications, sets up branches, and it spreads. When he goes to buy the medicines that his people in those rural communities love to use, he can't find them. What does he do? He seeks other ways to get those medications so that he can dispense to the people at the rate they can afford. Guess what? He's making money. The person those his contacts, new contacts, are making money, and the people who are getting these medicines that may not be good, unregistered, because they are cheap, really available, guess what? They're going down the drain. Their health is deteriorating, unknown to them. So where is the problem? Is it just about the man who's producing those fake drugs or bringing them in? Or about the administration, the government that's supposed to ensure that these things are working? Or the man and woman who's working in that hospital who are supposed to ensure that the medicines that are brought in by government, the original registered medicines manufactured sometimes in Nigeria by pharmaceutical companies in the country who are doing a good job, are used effectively and not sold off or carted away to your personal, for your own personal need. Where is the problem? I think one of the biggest issues we have in Nigeria, Timlin, consequence man.
Well, you know, just looking at that report yesterday and all of that story about NAFDAC sees this in that state, 326 million in Nasarawa the other day, another one in Sokoto, they shut down pharmaceutical pharmacies in Sokoto for violation of certain things. Look, the truth of the matter is, look, people, we have to brace ourselves. This challenge is not about to go away, no matter how much we highlight it right now. First, we don't even have that ethical drug distribution system, a very, very functional one. They've been talking about that for a long time. It's not come through yet. And then you look at why and how some of these things happen. Some of these fake drugs, why do people buy them? It's cheap. Think is, oh, it's cheap, I can afford it. First, they think about affordability, they see that there, I can grab it. You don't have all of those systems where, nope, you have to consult your doctor or your physician before you do any of those things. They don't see those things. And look at most of the adverts out there. They just tell you, outrightly tell you, go and self-medicate. That's what many of those things tell you. And then the question of capacity of the Drug Administration and Control Agency. Do they have that capacity? Shouldn't we have, look, I don't know when we'll decide to address this problem, this challenge headlong. There are several companies that have left this country in recent times. They've even stopped their distribution chain in this country because they just adulterated most of their pharmaceuticals. Fake all over the place. They just felt, you know what? They couldn't deal, and they left the country. And it's not the first. Several might still follow the same route if we don't address the problem headlong. And then you go to states. How do those states enforce? When you go to stores, just look through. If you take maybe 1 week, 3 days, look through the shelf. You see the amount of fake, expired products, not fake, expired now, that are on the shelves. And then you approach them and tell, oh, I didn't know, I'm sorry. Because sometimes we can be emotional, you let it go. They sell it to the next person who is not suspecting. So the systemic challenge that we have here. What we do and how we decide to do what we do, going to be of huge, huge importance. So it's a delicate segment, delicate sector, but capacity, enforcement, these are all issues. And you need to be a little more careful yourself. Your personal safety is huge importance. If it requires you to pay a little bit more to get quality, why not? Because if you go there and think because you can afford it, you take it, look, a living dog, you know what they say, is better than a dead lion. So think. Yeah, let's go through some of the dailies here. We're going to start with New Telegraph this morning. 80 killed as army drone bombs Kaduna village in error. So that was dominant across the dailies this morning. And you see Kaduna state government meets Islamic clerics, traditional rulers. Abbas mourns victims, demands probe of incident. Lots of S's there, isn't it? But I know several questions about all of these things. So it is here, and I'll just skip it because you see it in several other dailies this morning. And then at the bottom strip, you get to see FG resumes trial of suspected Boko Haram members. So that's one to see. It says, security, citizens' welfare, government's primary duty. Court convicts, sentences 4 Boko Haram financiers. You might want to go check the names if you think they'll name me. Terror financing, money laundering, disrupt democracy in West Africa. Paris. I remember all the time that, when you think of Boko Haram menace, and there were just several questions. You see Hiluxes all lined up in huge convoy. You see several things, and then people kept asking the basic questions. These vehicles coming through somewhere. What kind of vehicle are they using? Can we trace where the vehicle come from? How did they get the vehicle? Who's sponsoring them? Some of these things were just out there in the open. Now you thought the agencies would investigate and just follow the money. Look at the time the NSAS happened. It was easy for then CBN. They were able to track the accounts of so-called financiers of NSAS at the time in no time. And then it took us forever because they kept on telling us, we will name the sponsors, we will name the sponsors. And we just never saw those things. It took, I think, was it UAE or so that named some Nigerians who were financing terrorism in the country. And even at that, it appeared as though we just glossed over it. Consequence management. That's no telegraph.
Well, I have 2 here, and 2 of them are leading me very interesting.
You can't take 2 at the same time, though.
Yeah, that's torn for which for.
Okay.
But let's start with the leadership newspaper, and they have this one. That matter of the army's error. Anger as army bombs Kaduna villages. Page 4. Residents claim 80 killed, 50 injured. Was done in error. We were after terrorists, says General Officer Commanding. Governor Sani, Northern Elders demand probe. Oof, that wasn't a good one yesterday. Good one at all. All right, but let's move up just below the nameplate. Bank limits withdrawals to 10,000, 10K as cash scarcity bites harder.
Say what?
Yeah.
Which bank? Nigerian bank?
Nigerian banks, of course. So you want to go do and make a withdrawal, they tell
Cash
you
scarcity?
Strictly 10,000 naira.
What's going on?
I mean, we just last week we got the Supreme Court judgment that says the 2 notes.
Yo, this is not petrol. Banks should be careful.
Hold on. The 2 notes
Don't hold this thing.
Are allowed to go hand in hand. I mean, go together as legal tender for an indefinite period.
So what's the challenge this time?
So the securities printing and minting company can come up and tell us what's going on. CBN, please tell us, why is there cash scarcity in the country? What's going on? So you get to page 7 for more details on that. Above the nameplate, another sad story. 38 abducted varsity students still with the bandits. In that the LaSalle University students that were kidnapped, they're still with the bandits. And the parents came out protesting yesterday. Let's hope that something good will come out of this real quick. Let's come down and run through some stories here. Oh, former spokesperson to the president has a memoir. They're going to release it soon. But Justice Minister pushes for non-custodial sentencing is on page 7. And then FG takes over completed second Niger bridge. So hopefully those traveling for the Christmas holidays or the festive period have a smooth and easier drive through that access. But that's it from leadership.
And up next this morning is the Guardian newspaper that, puts out its big story that compels you to do a double take, and perhaps rethink some of our choices as a country. Listen to this. Kano, Sokoto, others spend 53.2 billion naira on scholarships abroad. And you find the infographic there, breaking it down for you state by state. Let's go over it together. Over 120,000 foreign scholarships by 5 states in 10 years, Ayo. Between 2013 and 2023, Kano spent 36.5 billion naira sponsoring about 115,288 students abroad. Borno spent 588 million naira between 2020 and 2023 on 180 students. Katsina spent 625 million naira between 2018 and 2023 on 180 students. And Adamawa in 2023 sponsored 120 students. Sokoto spent 1.4 billion naira between 2016 and 2022 on 4,600 students. And there you have it, just at the top right-hand corner of that infographic, 4 million out-of-school children. I'm not quite sure if it's, putting together all of the out-of-school children in these 4 to 5 states combined. And if we checked, the multidimensional poverty statistics, you'll probably find the highest number of states with multidimensional poverty amongst the states, or these states combined. And then you also see that one of these states, also has some of its students merged in states, in countries outside Nigeria, where they have outstanding fees that have not been settled, and they've been sponsored by their states to embark on scholarships abroad.
I had reason to, in the course of last week, look at the website of the NERDC. That's the organization in the education sector in Nigeria saddled with the responsibility of coming up with the curriculum for all of our schools, primary, secondary, maybe even university as well. And I was looking for a forward-thinking curriculum, something that looks like, okay, we are planning for the future. From the very primary, from primary 1 down to JS to SS.
Senior secondary.
I was looking for something. Well, I wasn't able to go through them all in detail, but I was looking at the headlines, the subjects themselves. I think, even to the university level, I was looking for something I really couldn't find. And no matter how innovative you are as a school proprietor, your chances are limited because you have to go by what is within the country. Yes, we also still hear people tell us, in the country, that it is not true that our academics isn't good enough in Nigeria, that if you go abroad, you can still use what you have to elevate and all of that. But this is the same Nigeria that people came to from all over the world to study. Lecturers did that thing that they do, they go on sabbatical.
The exchange
they
program.
They left their countries to come to Nigeria for their sabbaticals. Does that still happen today? So it is not too much of a surprise what is leading the front page of
the Guardian
newspaper this morning. Don't also forget that even schools, Nigerians they go outside of Nigeria to countries as close as Benin Republic.
To study.
To study.
Absolutely.
Now, it is scholarships we are talking about here now. So, I don't even know what to make of it.
Beyond the contradiction in, the value in education that Nigeria offers, for me, what's more compelling is the poverty rate in these countries and this amount of money that has been spent on education scholarships abroad. It begs the question, and it compels us to rethink our options as a country. Well, you also have right under the big story on the front page, over 80 dead as Army admits error in 10th accidental bombing in 2 years. RAN is on my mind, and the Army had better provide better explanations about what exactly has gone wrong. Will compensation be paid to the families of those who have lost their loved ones in this avoidable disaster? Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspaper.
The Nigerian Observer is leading with that COP22 story. FG funding 422 delegates to COP28 summit, not 1,411, says Minister. Well, if you're wondering how that became, you can go to channelstv.com. The story is right there for you with the video, so you know the look on the minister's face. I'm not going to let anything out. You go see it for yourself. The details of that story, of course, you find on the front page, and it continues on page 2. Above the nameplate, Obaseki ERA unveiled innovative project to revolutionize emergency response in Edo. That's also right there on the front page, and the story continues on the inside pages. And that vexed issue of the Nigerian Army is also there, right beside the nameplate. Nigerian Army owns up to Kaduna airstrike. That story is on page 2. That's the Nigerian Observer this morning.
Kaduna, 50 killed in Army's aerial bombing of bandits. 53 injured. Air Force denies involvement. Governor Sani orders probe of Kaduna drone attack, offers survivors free Medicare. Tudumbiri's bombing regrettable. Can. Arewa Youth Group condemns mistaken bombing. It was by Allah's mercy that we survived. Survival. NEF demands investigation. So, and then you go to the bottom strip, they talk about the budget there. Why we passed 2024 budget for second reading. Subscribe to Abaribe. And some of the writers here says, I've not seen lawmakers debating budget without detailed breakdown. Ningi. Senate Appropriations Committee meets with MDAs, stakeholders, others today. So, did they pass the budget without detailed breakdown? So, that back and forth is going on now in terms of what exactly is going on here. So, is it just a blanket passage before they even saw details? Is that how it works? Is that why we are where we are today? As they say. Okay, that's Vanguard this morning.
Oh, Business Day is what I have here, and they're looking at the refineries. Remember that story of the is it 60 or 6,000 licenses left or out there and nothing? Well, they have this. Port Harcourt Refinery, December deadline heaps pressure on NNPCL. And the company says, we will deliver as promised. Company insists. That's the writer to that story. So, December is around the corner. He's here. We're in December already. So is it?
No, it's around the corner.
Okay, so let's just say end of December is around the corner, and hopefully the Port Harcourt Refinery will be up and running. But besides, I have this one. Nigeria's trade surplus hits 5-year high on weaker naira. Well, and below that, Peter Obi insists 2024 budget is prodigal. Oh, then this one on COP28 leaders, fossil fuel claims sparks debate. And that's it from Business Day.
Okay, there you go. So that ends it with a look at the dailies here then, I guess.
Just one more paper this morning. Let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Do we still have the Vanguard?
Oh, we're taking the Vanguard.
We're taking the
want
Vanguard.
to look at the Daily Independent newspaper this morning. And what do you have on its front page? The Nigerian military draws flags for frequent friendly fire. That's the lead of the Daily Independent newspaper today. Army claims responsibility for bombing innocent Kaduna villages. Over 85 killed, dozens injured, search and rescue still ongoing. It's avoidable result of intelligence failure, tactical incompetence. Who said that? Find the details on page 29. Kaduna governor orders investigation into killing, calls for calm. And right beneath that picture, registration of underage voters. Court gives INEC 90 days to hand over officials for prosecution. Asks it to remove underage voters from register within 90 days. How in the universe are we going to do that?
I thought INEC explained that it did a cleanup of the voters' register ahead of the presidential election when a lot of questions were being asked about strange names on the voters' register. So how come we're having this?
The questions are still being asked.
They're never going to go away.
There was one analyst we had said, look, we need to clean up that register because how many people have been reported to have died or consequently removed from the register as a result?
So when we clean up, some unscrupulous elements have access to the register again and again.
I don't know about that one, but hey,
INEC needs to provide some explanation in that regard.
Well, I guess INEC is going to have to answer to the court That's the story is right beneath the picture and above the nameplate. Reps to make public participation in budget process compulsory. That's according to the Speaker of the House.
Promises should be kept, Mr. Speaker.
Well, the Speaker has spoken. As the Daily Independent this morning.
And that ends our newspaper review segment this morning. We have quite a lot to unpack for you this morning. We're sure you don't want to miss it. So stick around. We'll be right back.
The Kaduna State government this morning has received briefings on Sunday night attack, which left several citizens dead and others injured at Tudumbiri in Igabi local government area of Kaduna State. In the meeting, which was presided by Her Excellency, the Deputy Governor, Dr. Hadiza Sabwa Balarabi, which had in attendance heads of security agencies, religious and traditional leaders. The Nigerian Army explained the circumstances which led to the unfortunate and unintended attack. The GOC 1 Division, Nigerian Army, Major General V.U. Okoro, explained that the Nigerian Army was on a routine mission against terrorists, but unfortunately, some members of the Tudumbiri community were affected. Search and rescue efforts are still ongoing, as dozens of injured victims have been evacuated to Barrow Diko Teaching Hospital by the government. Like I explained to you, the search and rescue efforts are still ongoing. We will communicate to members of the press further development as we receive. We are sad by this unfortunate incident, and Kaduna State government, under the leadership of Senator Obasani, has condoled members of the entire community.
Director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for
it's December, and yet to have a plethora of items still hitting the polity, as it were. You never either thought, okay, it's festive period, so we should be in that mood, but look, what it is here. But that unfortunate incident, it's what clearly dominates the headlines, and rightly so, because it raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, much as the Air Force did put up a statement saying, look, because several people went to town saying it was the Air Force that did it. Air Force put up a statement saying, no, that was not Air Force. Air Force had not carried out any attack whatsoever in the last 24 hours. And so people should, media should verify the stories before they claim that it was the Air Force. But Army drone, it turns out it was an error. And one wonders, how do people respond to this? Error, especially when you know that this kind of case has happened before, where there was bombing, they said it was a mistaken target, and now this.
Well, there's actually, first I'd like to commiserate with the affected families. You know, loss of human life is deeply painful. People you were playing with, talking to and doing all kinds of, all of a sudden they are no more and permanently. So I commiserate with them. And I congratulate the state government for the prompt response, not just in acknowledging the crisis, but in saying that the state will bear the cost. Now, that's clear, responsible, and quick display of control leadership, and it's also announced investigation. Now, the part where I think we might need to be a little careful is where it concerns the army. 3 definite, incontrovertible facts must be put on the table. Number 1, the Nigerian army did not set out in that operation to kill civilians. They didn't set out to kill Nigerians. They were in their routine business of trying to maintain and sustain national security. And so, in terms of operational intention, they were looking for and shooting at bandits and terrorists. In the process, what Americans call collateral damage occurred. So whereas we acknowledge the pain, whereas we insist that it be investigated, and if there was carelessness, it should be dealt with, we should be careful about statements and reactions that would demoralize an already over-challenged Nigerian army. If you get out on the street, it's their boys that are on the street. They're not supposed to be there. They are spread too thin. You go to the southeast, you see them everywhere. The other, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, a plane load of soldiers was shot down in Niger State. 20, I think, died. What was the response? The state governor said, no, don't think of attacking. You know, go and talk with them. You see that we must not overlook the fact that it's a failure of civilian political leadership that's responsible for a national crisis from the angle of security. Because if the people in your state are employed, if there's law and order, etc., there will be nobody to radicalize. So these things will be put on the table so that we don't pretend that our crisis in the nation today is bandits. No, it's failure of political leadership. Responsible civilian political leadership is the failure that has created for the army, the police, and the other security agencies jobs that need not exist today.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, when you have this professional, very well-trained force who are supposed to be precise, precision targets, it raises questions about how they manage this scenario. And then if it was a drone, and so managing this will be huge, because if people say, but we've seen this before, we've seen it again, what's the chances that we won't see it happen another time? And so they just wonder.
Kimberly, chances are that it could happen. And if you look at the Iraqi war, if you look at all wars, particularly the international engagements of the US, where the concept of friendly fire did not come from Igbo language, it did not come from your village. Friendly fire, your intention is to take out the enemy. It turns out that the guy you opened fire on was on your side. So it is, first we must acknowledge the pain. We must say it's unacceptable. We must call for greater professional efficiency. But our reaction must be tempered by the fact that we are human and that misfires do occur and occur everywhere, even in the most, even the Ukrainian war.
Yeah, but,
yes.
but as civilians now, citizens, the questions would then be, so from the previous ones that has happened, do we get any communication or any sense that they've adjusted whatever went wrong then, such that this won't occur again? Or are we going to live it with just, or it was an error? Everybody moves on.
No, it's very painful. We shouldn't play it down. But look at the scenario. You and I are the pilots. We've gone out on a bombing operation. We have weather readings before we take off. We have clear markers of where to bomb, and midway something happens. There are circumstances. I don't want to go into the details because 2 things might occur. May be mistaken for an excuse. Some might even be offended. You know, people died and they are talking about this thing. It is very painful, it is unacceptable, but let's get to the facts. For 3 or 4 things we need to acknowledge. Friendly fires do occur, even with the most sophisticated military. During the Iraqi war, the Kuwait engagement, there were places that were bombed on the mistaken assumption that they were tanks. Now, this doesn't excuse this. You remember also in the past, I think a refugee camp had been bombed in Aero, here in Nigeria. So those things are unacceptable, but we must put all of it in context. An overstretched military, a nation where there's a lot of bitterness and suffering and hunger, hapless villagers bombed to death, is bad news. Very bad news. But let's also remember that the soldiers are us. It's with our money they bought that uniform. They are people's brothers, sisters, uncles, fathers, etc. It's no pleasure for them. And their job is the only job I know where you either open fire or you're dead. So let's acknowledge...
That's what they're trained for.
That's their job. That's their job. Nobody makes apology for that. If you did, why did you join the army? But having said that, you know that on the side here, okay, there's been a lot of bombing going on through the year. This is December. And probably this is the 1st or 2nd. And every other positive thing that has occurred since January, we point into the ghetto on account of this. That's the angle I want us to look at. But whichever way you look at it, this is very unpleasant business.
Indeed,
and we should, you know, yeah.
Indeed, very unpleasant. But there's some things you said earlier that I think we should just step back a bit. You talked about failure of political leadership.
Yeah.
Saying if the people in your state are employed, insecurity would be curbed. And while I do agree with you, we all know that the states do not have the apparatus to manage insecurity. So as the security apparatus belongs to the federal government.
Yes.
So how would you tell a state governor that it's your failure to manage your space, even with all the jobs, they'll tell you they are creating jobs, their people are employed, yet they still have insecurity challenges. So how do they deal with that?
Disaggregation. First of all, there was a time there was no insecurity. Not up to 5% the degree of insecurity we have today. The governors were also not in charge of security because their people were either mechanics, farmers, whatever. And then people were in school, government was spending on the appropriate things. So if you look at it today, and it will look, oh, they're not in charge of security. No, that was it. They've always not been in charge of security, and they had not always been in security. So what went wrong? You look at the event in Borno, how state activities led to the emergence of deviants. You look at, as the space shrank, the space you're leaving behind was being taken up. And that's what's been going on. Look, November 2021, some of us were guests of the multinational joint task force in N'Djamena, Chad. And we saw why it will be practically impossible for what's going on there to end. Because they've taken residents, they've worked out agreements with the people, they know that the joint task force cannot come more than 25 kilometers into any of the 4 affected countries. So they operate out of that range. The people have agreed, they know what they are paying. The women, we met with the women leaders who explained that, look, our sons are there, not willingly. We don't want them to be shot. The army will come here, the Air Force. No, we're not cooperating with them. These people, we know what we pay. Now, when you have that kind of situation, remember that's part of the state. Would you say there are schools there? Nothing.
So at what point does the political class not see the change in dynamics and then begin to change strategy as well?
Oh, that's easy to see. When you fly mostly by private jet, you know the condition of the roads. Now, tell me which of the governors does not travel by private jet? When your understanding of development is to flag off big projects in the city, particularly the state capital, how would you know what's going on? When you assign police, let's suppose this is part of Abuja, and we have a station, and 19 policemen are assigned to this entire place to protect it, and the 3 of us are wealthy people who can take about 6 or 7 of them, or 9, it reduces the number, how would you know? And when all the big men have escorts, armed, etc., so you can understand why the elite is totally disconnected with the reality it's supposed to manage. And so it has also bred a new class of young replacement generation who do not understand or see any connection between office and service. I'm your PA, or I say, what's my job schedule? I carry your bag, I greet you in the morning, I don't see any file, I do nothing. And there are 2,000 of us, and I'm hoping you make me a head of parastatal. Because once you do that, I have my own SUV, I have police escort, and I spend money. The concept of income generation and development doesn't exist. The consciousness of the emerging elite and the reflexes of the serving elite and existing elite is reinforcing it.
You know, serving there is relative.
No, misuse of words. You see, I said serving and then existing, so I think let's opt for existing.
It is that spending of money that Nigerians were angry about a couple of days ago concerning COP28, Nigeria's delegation, where initially 1,411 were said to have been those from Nigeria. Then government eventually spoke up and saying, well, Nigeria's government, federal government-funded delegation is made up of a total of 422 persons. So they went ahead and listed it. National Council of Climate Change, 32. Federal Ministry of Environment, 34. All ministries. Now, you need to look clearly to look at what they say. All ministries. So if you see the names of these ministries, because this is 167. Presidency, 67. Office of the Vice President, 9. National Assembly, 10. Federal parastatals / agencies, 73. So you have all ministries, you still have parastatals and agencies, 73 of them. And so government seems to be saying, look, not 411.
Just 400 and something.
So, as government says.
And that's good, right?
Go and do what? Okay, let me tell you what I would have done if I was in a position of government. What ministry? The climate change people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
National Council on Climate Change, 32.
You sent 2 people.
Instead of 32.
You sent 2 people because it's an exchange. There's something you want to say, somebody you will say it. There's, whether secretarial backup or whatever, somebody who could be doing something, working with you. So you go, 2 of you go, you do all the briefing, you gather all the data. We come back to that agency and have a 2-day retreat or 3, where we brief them, tell them what new things have come in that we can apply here. 30 people off. Now you look at all the other ministries.
Environment, 34.
34. This is just an opportunity for discussion, ESTA code. But the worry is the lack of a sense of shame and embarrassment in the use of public funds. So you should, okay, if you take 33 people, these will be mostly principal officers out of a ministry for how many days? You've shut it down. But that's not the issue. Let me give an example. I think sometime in the mid-2000s, Peter Obi had taken over as governor of Anambra State. And you know the World Igbo Congress is a major, it's like the ultimate event, global event in the name of Igbos. And so it was taking place in Lagos, and they brought him the list of those going. Nearly 60. He said, wait, what are they going to do? He said, no, he said, World Igbo Congress. He said, no, that's not my question. What are they going to US to do? He said, to attend World Igbo Congress. He said, I'm the one invited. He said, yes, please, go and adjust the list. They went, came back, it was still 30-something. I said, sir, see where it was. I said, I'm not saying where it was. I'm asking you why they have to go. It's World Igbo Congress. So they're going to discuss things pertaining to affecting Igbos. Let one person go and come back and brief us. They didn't believe it, but that's what happened. The same thing happened with his travel list. You see, we must connect expenditure with projected, feasible, and realistic benefits. So this number, it doesn't excuse anything.
See government's response. It said, as the biggest economy and most populous country in Africa, with a substantial extractive industry and extensive vulnerability to climate change, Nigeria has a significant stake in climate action, and our active and robust participation at COP is therefore not unwarranted.
It is not unwarranted. It's important that we went. It's important that the president speaks. It's important that our position on the matter is known. It's important that we also, in fact, speak for West Africa and our country, because much of the places where you have banditry, re-desertification is taking place, etc. No question about that. We're not quarreling with whether we should have gone. If we didn't go, it would have been really bad. Who should have gone? How many should have gone? For what purpose? Now, all these people, if you say, okay, when you come back, let's see deliverables. How many of them will tell you anything? So I think, personally, I think it was a mistake. The number is too much. The explanation that government sponsored only 400 and something still leaves unanswered the question of who paid for the rest, because you're talking about what the federal government did. The rest are not private individuals. So I think the number was too much. That's just the summary.
That 422, so say that's federal government funded.
Yes.
So let's look at another breakdown here that has about the whole 1,411. We see here the Ministry of Environment, 53, National Assembly, 36, NNPC, 28, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 21, Ministry of Environment, again, 16, the first one was Federal Ministry of Environment, 53. Now, Ministry of Environment here, assuming that's a state Ministry of Environment, 16, Lagos State Government, 14, NDDC, 13. I mean, in the Niger Delta, you need to know about the environment. Bank of Industry, 13, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, 12, Federal Capital Territory, 11, NSIA, 9, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, I guess that's a state ministry. But if you go down, you see multiple times Ministry of Environment. And then you also see some private organizations there as well. All coming down to that number. Considering the size of Nigeria.
The source of that is
StatiSense. This is from StatiSense.
And the claim it was an on-site registration.
Yes. That initially, they were, I think, the ones who blew the whistle.
So one begins to ask the question, because it is believed that for the first time, the numbers of all those that attended the event were taken note of, and they were all registered. For the first time that's been. But doesn't this say a lot about our country, Nigeria, being the enormous size that we are? We need to get there, and from different angles, we are pulling information. There are different meetings that happen at the COP. It's beyond a 2-day event. I mean, we've finished all the big events, but there are other sideline events happening, and you fault the size of delegation.
I do. The number is simply too much. Even if whichever way you choose to look at it, it's not about not attending, it's about how many and the value they are bringing. I think the number is too much. I think also it even presents an opportunity for some form of integration of capacities and perspectives. Take, for instance, Ministry of Environment. An event like this could provide opportunity for instance, for you to come back and convene the National Council on Environment, in which case all the states will be involved. You bring out what came from that event. Assuming, for instance, they took one person from each state, from environment, where they have, I have no problem with that. They will not be the anchor persons. So that's what I'm talking about. I believe the number is too much. I may be mistaken. And the defense of it could have been better structured also in wording. You can't say, oh, Nigeria. No, nobody's saying Nigeria shouldn't attend. We're saying that we could have gone with fewer numbers. And now you're talking about cost, you're talking about perception of wastefulness and all of that. It's uncomfortable to me that we could do this at this time, that's all. Because in all of this, yes, there'll be side events, there'll be syndicates, etc. We have capacity to deal with that without taking nearly 2,000 people out.
There are two other items that are uncomfortable to some people who have heard it, but we'll have to go to our colleagues in Lagos. They've got questions for you.
Thank you, Chamberlain. I'd like to start from the rear. Good morning, Mr. Okay. You put up some very interesting views on the accidental bombing and the explanation provided by the army. And RAN is on my mind, you know, from 2017 when 115 people died. Beyond failure of political leadership, let's also look at the rules of engagement of the army. Is there any explanation tenable from the army? Is this not a failure of the army's technology, and doesn't it speak to the professional capacity of the army as well? According to The Guardian this morning, this is the 10th accidental bombing by the Nigerian army in 2 years. So beyond the failure of civilian political leadership, shouldn't we begin to also look at the competence of the Nigerian army, which, you know, has been famed to be leading the charge in prosecuting, you know, wars, even on behalf of neighboring African countries in the recent past? And here we are, you know, with the Nigerian army, you know, with 10 accidental bombings, with a lot of casualty of civilian population on their hands in 2 years.
Yes, I understand the point, but I'd like to separate them for clarity. There is no connection whatsoever between civilian leadership and the bombing. So I want us to disaggregate that. I brought in the element of civilian leadership when I was talking about the fact that insecurity, first of all, and banditry cannot take place except you have unemployed people, all manner of social dislocations, in which case the people are outside the economic and social safety nets, and therefore they go into all sorts of things and radicalization. So that's a totally different thing. And I made that comment in connection with the question regarding the fact that, oh, you know, governors are not heads of security, and therefore that explains banditry. I pointed out that there was a time there was no banditry, no terrorism, and governors were still not head of security. So I thought we should disaggregate that. Now, on the question of the bombing itself, it is bad news. It's not good. It's also unacceptable for it to be so frequent. That must also be acknowledged. So, but the other point I wanted us to be sensitive to, by pointing out that this is unacceptable, is that the army itself, the Nigerian military is under a lot of pressure doing jobs it's not supposed to be doing. So it is clearly must have been a miscalculation because they didn't set out to shoot civilians. But having said that, it's important we do whatever needs to be done to ensure that this doesn't happen again. 100 and something, I mean, so many people killed and so many injured. These are human beings, fathers, mothers, children. The place is thrown into mourning. So it's not good at all, it's not acceptable, but at the same time, let's also be sensitive to the fact that the army did not set out to kill civilians. So the way I agree with you is that whatever miscalculation, logistical challenges may have led to this should be avoided, if possible, permanently in future. But we must not move from there to go and give the impression that, you know, it was deliberately intended to take out some civilians. No, I'm not sure. I'm also sure that's not the point you're making.
And, well, point taking there, I was just curious about the rules of engagement of the army. Back to the current conversation, which is COP28. And, you know, we've had cause to also look at the numbers of the delegates from other countries. Kenya has 765, Ghana 618, the United Kingdom has 697, Canada has 742, you know, and that if we look at their own delegates list, it's a lot more than what the Nigerian government claims it's sponsored in an official capacity. And the argument from the political elite, particularly from our conversation on our sister political program last night with Senator Jimo Ibrahim, is that this number is required as some form of political currency that can earn us the right to host the conference sometime in the near future, and therefore we need to sort of measure up. I wonder if you agree with this argument and if it justifies sponsoring that number of delegates to COP28.
Oh, well, let us assume that the claim is correct. There is a number of delegates you bring that earns you the right to host subsequently. If that is true, then they probably should have taken an entire local government along. What qualifies you to host FIFA is not that you send 2 million people to watch World Cup in another country, but that you have the right facilities, security, and logistical efficiency to warrant your hosting it. Now, if we also assume that this explanation is correct, then that should have been what would come out from the presidency. What we are told is that Nigeria has a stake and it would be bad if we didn't attend. Now, if somebody had come out to say, yes, Nigeria has a stake, look at the number of delegates from other countries, our own is not as outrageous. In any case, the number of delegates and the extent of participation is often a qualifier for subsequent hosting, potentially. And therefore, we know what we are doing. We are following the rules. The rules of engagement are such that the more visible you are, the more likely you are to become a major stakeholder to the extent that you could host it. If that was the explanation, they will have something else to quarrel about. Finally, on this, if Kenya has 600, UK has 700 and something, all the figures you mentioned, it still does not address the question of why they are there. The fact of their numbers is different from the justification for the numbers. They may all have done the same thing we did. So I don't have the details on that, but my point is, from the angle of administrative efficiency and effectiveness, and also in terms of measurable income outcomes, I believe fewer people should have gone. Now, if there's some other information on this matter that's not available to me, that may then explain why it is right to have the number that went. I have no terminal position on this matter other than to say that the facts available to me and common sense suggests to me that the numbers were too large. And when you look at some of the detailed breakdowns, you ask yourself why so many people would come from just one agency. Even if you're going from most of the national councils, you say, okay, National Council on Information is being hosted by Ogun State. All the state ministries of information will send representation. How many would come? If we're going to UN, but the major thing is that the optics are bad and the explanations are worse than the optics. There might be a more cogent one, and I think they should give that.
Lastly, from me, Prof, let's assume without conceding that these numbers from all the different participating countries in the world are justified, then we'll be having nothing less than about 50,000 delegates from different countries in the world participating in the climate change conference annually. And they all fly from different parts of the world to the location. And, you know, aircraft use Jet A1 fuel, and Jet A1 fuel is fossil fuel, which also emits CO2 into the atmosphere that causes global warming. So I
see your point.
Have leaders, you know, do they have their priorities right, really? Because we're talking about climate change and the adverse effects on the weather conditions in the world.
Well, I think it's a deliberately mischievous question, quite frankly. If you want to, let's suppose you want to, what do you call it? But quite objectively, and from the perspective of plain, straightforward science, there's nothing wrong with them flying there, because if you look at the degree of pollution that will have been occasioned by the Jet A1 of 50,000, they didn't each go with an aircraft. You probably have 300 or something of them in one vehicle, so it does not arise at all. It would be an unfair, you know, indictment to suggest that, oh, you know, since you're about climate change and removing emissions, probably you should have trekked down to the venue. I beg your pardon. You mean Tinubu and our respected delegation will trek on top of the Atlantic just to make sure there's no pollution? I disagree, my dear sister.
You know, Prof, interestingly, I was going to ask for something. Maybe Bukola was talking about us using camels and the rest of those things. But, you know, I was actually going to ask you something related to that. This is the 28th edition of the COP. And from what you have seen, already one of the head of the United Nations Development Program, Achim Steiner, has started to complain about the ballooning numbers of people who attend COP every time it holds. So I was going to ask you about the impact it has made so far in the world. On the one hand is, you know, the rising cases of global warming and the rest of it. Energy transition conversation still ongoing. The president, even in his budget speech, made an issue of it and is asking questions about the funding for these things so that Africa can take its pride of place. what's your take on the effect, the impact of these COP conversations over the years, particularly for Nigeria?
Well, beginning from the global, COP has been, if you like, opportunity for speech making at the global level about environmental issues. That's largely what it must honestly be said to be, because you look at when it began and what's been going on over the years, the frightening reality is that we have increased damage to the environment, greater evidence of climate change, more devastations, progressively, and in recent times going in leaps and bounds. The beluga whales, they have their habitat wiped out. Penguins are suffering. Polar bears are becoming endangered because the ice is melting due to global warming. When about 15 years ago or less, we had 10 sinking cities. Globally, cities that are confirmed to be sinking consistently and eventually sink. Lagos is one of them. The number of sinking cities has increased because the water volume is rising due to melting ice. So if all of these things are happening, all the indications or indices of climate change are worsening, the question to ask is, does COP really amount to anything beyond the speeches? And you ask also the major drivers, the Western developed nations and all of Europe, are they not the ones emitting over 80% of what's damaging the climate? Do they have things in place to control that? You have the carbon, what do you call it now? Carbon, I don't remember the exact technical name, which is supposed to ameliorate. So, and then the shipping companies, petroleum, do they still not clean the hull of their ship in the ocean? Why is it that our oceans are having more dead zones, that's sections where nothing can live? Why is so when you look at all of that, and then you have 50,000 people going for a conference, my dear, even the Tower of Babel, we were not told that you had up to 50,000 in attendance. So it's going to generate a lot of documents, some of them on geological issues, some of them on what can be done, some of them action plans, which will not be activated because it will translate at the end of the day to the discretion and commitment of individual nations that attended. Yes, it's ballooning, and that's precisely why not much is likely to come out. And I say this with the benefit of hindsight, knowing that if you look at the indices of climate change 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you look at it today, the question you will be asked, and which you've rightly asked, what has COP delivered and what is it likely to deliver? My take is that it is important to attend and take positions. It's important to draw attention to the challenges, particularly facing Africa in that regard. We are having serious desertification in the northern part of our country. But to expect to assume that COP itself will make any impact, it has no capacity for enforcement. But international visibility on global matters at a time like this is very important for any nation that takes itself seriously. So it's important that we go, it's important that we participate, it's important that our views are known. But if you're talking about measurable impact and income, particularly from the angle of benefit to Nigeria and Africa, I'm yet to see what that is.
You know, one of the things that the president made very, very clear concerning COP is that the globe, the world, must fund Africa's climate change agenda as much as possible so that whatever deliverables are expected of Africa would get to Africa. Do you see that happening? Do you see the world listening to Africa and funding climate change initiatives, particularly in the light of the high level of poverty in Africa?
See, it's important the president made that point. Africa is part of the world. But I hope we are not looking at it from the angle of beggars permanently carrying a plate or come and rescue us. Because sometimes these things come after observing your own interventions. Recall that when Obasanjo was president, we didn't get forgiveness because we begged for it. There were steps the government took and convinced those who were owing that, look, we can write off this debt. These guys are becoming serious. Now, let's look here where we have desertification progressing. Much of the rainforest is turning to savanna, and the savanna is turning to pure arid desert all over the country. And I'll cite an example I'm sure I've cited on this show more than once, or at least once before. When you build a dam, what happens is that the communities and livelihoods downstream that are dependent on the river will be wiped out. Fishermen will either disappear or reduce, crab farmers will go, etc. Now, we've been building dams over the years such that the volume of water coming down from the north to the southern part of the country up to River Niger has gone down by over 68%. And what used to be part of the river is now just dry land. Some of them several meters high, used to be filled with water. Now imagine that there's a cocktail of steps and measures Nigeria is taking to deal with all of that. And it is now saying these measures we are taking need some kind of leveraging and reinforcement, and this is the kind of funding, etc. It will be something the international community will be a little embarrassed not to assist with. There's a technology that enables you plant in the desert. It retains water. China did a display of that. It's in use in many places. Imagine that what you're asking for is support to make it possible for the areas that are getting where desertification is taking place, a project. Why they will want to fund such a thing is that very likely it will also mean trade for them. So it's good the president said that. It's also, it's actually will be better also, now that he has said it, for us to be doing things here that can easily attract funding for climate change initiatives.
Which
but
raises...
to ask for funding, you know, nations work with action plans. You can't just ask for funding because you think you deserve it. Show what you're doing, draw money to flow into it.
Which raises another question for me, Prof, very quickly. That of engagement with the people. Just as you said, desertification is a problem in Africa. But when we raise climate change issues, global warming issues, do you think Nigerians are, or generally people in Africa, even understand the issues, even though it affects them the most? I'm asking that against the backdrop of trust quotients. I see a nexus between these conversations around COP, the delegate controversial list, and the issues raised in Kaduna as that of trust. Arewa Consultative Forum, for instance, the Arewa Youth Consultative Forum, for instance, are raising the issue of failure of intelligence. No matter what explanation is given, as far as they are concerned, trust is a problem. The NEF is also asking for questions to be raised along that particular issue. And then COP, of course, delegates list and controversies and everything like that. How do you expect or suggest that government should converse with people long-term so that they can give governments, whatever the issue that arises, some benefit of doubt in the long run, particularly in the name of national orientation?
Okay, first of all, yes, you say the Arewa Youth spoke. Several other organizations speak, and they're talking about intelligence. And I ask, is it not usually through the younger generation that intelligence is acquired because they're the most mobile? You see, this also presents an opportunity to urge some of these organizations of presumably young people to realize that press releases and the attacks on the older generation does not translate into any activity. And also look into their own processes and admit that most of them are just usually hunting for visibility and money. And they can make a speech in defense of whoever is ready to pay. Now, I'm not speaking with particular reference to the group you mentioned, but that has become the dominant pattern. Because that these organizations that ought to be platforms for leadership recruitment and leadership replacement have also been taken over by buccaneers. Now, having said that, conversation with the people, you can't converse or trust somebody you don't know. The platforms for conversation where state governments try to do that, they call town hall meetings. People like you and I will attend. After the event, we go to our houses. There's no smaller group below us that we now call together and then transmit further what government is doing. So you see that it becomes an incestuous engagement of the elite that doesn't trickle down. Sometimes they say, you know, if you want it to trickle down, print it in all the Nigerian languages. You know, English is there. Do Pidgin English, Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, at least the three main languages. And I ask, my uncle in the village will leave what he's doing to read what you wrote. about Abuja he doesn't know anything about. The disconnect is real, and it's not about Tinubu, it's not about federal government. It's the absence of the involvement of those at the lower levels. State governors, local government chairmen, ward chairmen, council chairmen, they are not visible the way they ought to be. And that's partly responsible for also the failure of intelligence. Because if you're in a locality where you know yourselves, strangers will be easily detected. But when nobody has a sense of community, no sense of responsibility, they keep quiet whatever they see.
All right, speaking about press releases, the Army put up a press release this morning about that matter. And then they were saying that, yes, they did notice advancement of terrorists who were going to pose a threat to key infrastructure in the state and to civilians. And so they had to respond. And that we should also note that some of these terrorists usually embed themselves within the civilian populace so that the civilians will take the brunt of the whole matter and then have a lot of... But they said, well, yes, that one such measure, that the military, they regret the tragedy, but they will always conduct themselves in possible best of light. That's Major General Uba. Yeah, I was going to move on to another one.
No, very quickly on this. You see, war has become asymmetrical. These are soldiers who are trained to take out targets. Now, when target embeds itself in the very entity you're trying to protect, your training comes in the line of fire. And if they were advancing and you wouldn't know how much. So I think you get the context. Yeah. Asymmetrical warfare has become the norm, and it presents greater challenges.
So as we wind down, now there's supposed, I think there was IPAC or so, there's this planned process which certain civil society organizations are organizing. I think they call it Occupy INEC. They want to protest and ensure that the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, vacates his seat because of the woeful performance and bias, as the CSOs claim, which IPAC dissociated themselves from. But speaking of INEC, there was an attack on the residence of the resident electoral commissioner in Kogi State, and the images were not looking good. Of course, the police said they would look into the matter, but that appeared to be some dangerous signal concerning what may happen moving forward. What's your impression of that?
First of all, from the angle of occupying INEC office, nobody should go and occupy it.
Why not?
It is not part of our social process. You know what to do. If you want the chairman to go, take whatever. But if you say occupy INEC office to send the chairman, what if I don't like the chairman of any RC? I got another group and occupy. Okay, I don't like the Chief Justice of the Federation. I go to the...
What if it's a peaceful protest?
No problem at all. But occupy INEC office, deny people access, no. Go and picket the place if you want. But don't disturb the staff. If you think the president should sack him, tell him, write a letter, display the letter. But to go and occupy and probably say we won't live until, that's not the kind of country we want. All of us are angry about one thing or the other. If we resort to self-help, we're doomed. You know, so no, it's not on. The fact that you're a CSO doesn't translate into superior patriotism. So let them not presume some imaginary profile that doesn't exist. This is our country, we're equal stakeholders. We can't just go and occupy where we don't like. Because, okay, you're CSOs. What if one tap as the party decide to go and occupy, what do you call it? Nigerian breweries. Yes, you should check out of Nigeria, have palm wine before you guys come. Come on. So, you know, so on the, no, it's a very dangerous trend because it means, it's not new, quite all right, but it's increasing where holding office and serving the public or the nation becomes increasingly dangerous. But the other controversy is holding office and performing a service. Are you always serving the nation? You're likely to be more endangered when there's perception of bias, in which case those who feel you've worked against them, not that you follow the rules, will then also become as desperate as those you worked for to take you out.
All right, we're out of time. Couldn't go to the other matter. Some officials of government in Kano State were caught repackaging palliatives, and the police say that they would deal decisively with all those people.
Can I do 1 minute on that?
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute. Fine. It's not new. 1983, essential commodities. COVID-19, the same thing now, but it's more now because those who are supposed to service the state are the ones subverting the public good. Worse now.
Professor Okeke-Chukwu, Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Thank you for coming on this morning. All right, we're back in a moment. Don't go away.
Who's your guy? See how sweet they like beans and rice. Labour Party, I will never leave your side. I will never ever. I dedicate my time forever, time to you, my people. Even if the road be rough, I know mine. 'Cause together we shall stand. Labour Party, who's your guy? Now Olumide Akpata. See how sweet they like beans and rice. 'Cause together we shall.
Where Kaduna Refinery is meant to come from what the brief that we got is meant to be completed by the end of 2024. But like what the GCO said, everything that is required to ensure that, within the work schedule, everything goes on smoothly from what you hear from the GCO is put in place. And me as minister, my own is to hold them accountable, to what they have said. And I'll continue to hold them accountable, continue to support them, work with them to ensure that we deliver to Nigerians at the refineries, which are very, very important for the survival of our economy.
Our plans are in progress. We will deliver this plant by the end of 2024. Every requirement to do this is in place, including process for delivery of feedstock at the end of that deadline. And our contractor have mobilized to site substantially. We have started receiving all necessary equipment that is required for this quick fix activity. And we are very confident that we will have the appropriate financing to get this to the end of it. And ultimately, Kaduna Refinery will restart again and it will deliver value to Nigerians. And I'm assuring the Honorable Minister that this will be delivered just as we're also doing for the other refineries. We do our plan, the quick fix is for 60% of capacity so that we can start making money from this plant, and then we'll continue the rest of the process so that we can bring it to full nameplate capacity, which will also tally with the completion of the BOT on the pipeline so that you have a reliable pipeline delivery infrastructure.
This morning, going from what you have seen, that promise that the federal government made that by December this year, the Port Harcourt Refinery will be in action, will be active. The Warri Refinery will work on it, will begin by next year. And by the end of 2024, Nigeria will be a net exporter of petroleum products. How feasible? You want to stick with us this morning as we have a conversation with our next guest, who is a former managing director of the Warri and Port Harcourt and Kaduna Refineries, Engineer Alex Ogedegbe. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's begin with that's what we just heard. You know, the GMD of the NNPC say, giving assurances over and over again that the Port Harcourt Refinery will be delivered before the end of this year, latest by December 31. And we're trying to hold government to their word. But some other experts are raising other issues about what exactly the federal government would be delivering at the end of this year. So tell us, do you think it is feasible what the GMD of the NNPCL is saying? That is the GCE, beg your pardon, of the NNPCL is saying, that's Mele Kyari, that the Port Harcourt Refinery will be completed before the end of this year.
Thank you. Let me first explain who I'm representing here. I'm not representing myself. I'm a past president of the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers, and we are very interested in what's going on, and we feel that we have a contribution to make to national discourse on this issue. That's one, and I will take this issue very seriously because we also tried 2 months ago, 5th of October, we were in Port Harcourt having our fellows conference there. And we had tried to make a visit to the refinery just to give them some support and to see what's going on there and see if we can make some contributions. On that team, there were at least 3 past MDs of that refinery, including myself, and some younger ones who have also passed through the refinery. So we were doing it in good faith and trying to help as a professional society. And that's one of the reasons why I'm also here to join you in, can I say, educating and informing the public. So if we know that, for that reason also, I wish that this country will produce petrol, especially petrol and diesel, enough for our consumption. As I indicated once or twice, in 1991, we were completely dependent on local. There was no import at all of all these products. The 3 refineries, Warri, Port Harcourt, and Kaduna, were working fairly close to 70–80% throughput. Unfortunately, all those refineries are shut down now. I don't want to go into that, but let's go to Port Harcourt Refinery. I want the question you raised.
Just a moment, so that people can appreciate what you're talking about.
Yes.
You said at some point that our refineries were operating at 70%, all of them put together.
Minimum
70%.
Yes.
I also understand that at some point...
Collectively now, sorry, collectively or one refinery operating at 70%?
All 3 were operating minimum of 70%.
Was there ever a time any one of them operated at 100%?
Yes, Port Harcourt Refinery operated at 100% in December 1992. I was MD.
With a refining capacity of?
150,000 barrels per day. I recall that because my chairman at the time, Chief Feide, had called me and said, I hear that you are running the refinery at 100%. I said, yeah, we can go 110.
Wow.
And that's the design is 100%, but you can push it if you need to. And we were doing that at that time because we were planning for a turnaround maintenance. So we had to store PMS, petrol, to last us the 30 days planned for turnaround. So I was running the refinery at 100%, and we had 50 million liters of PMS in storage, which we distributed for the whole month. Nobody knew we were shut down. But that was Port Harcourt Refinery.
This same Port
Harcourt Refinery.
This was which year, sir?
1991.
1991.
Yes.
So from your experience, what can you tell us about the capacity of these refineries and the potential for the turnaround that the federal government is currently embarking upon? Is what they're telling us feasible? Can these refineries actually come back on stream at 100% or at whatever percentage, perhaps average or above average?
As an engineer, I'm going to answer your question properly. 5–10 years ago, if I was told that we had a plan, a proper plan to get those refineries from 0, which they are now, to 100%, I would believe it. But if you see the depth of damage that has happened, especially the refineries, none of them has worked for 5 years, since 2017-18. Now, the Port Harcourt, let's come back to, so the issue is not, can it be done? There are many issues there. Who is going to do it? How much is it going to cost? There's a benefit cost analysis. So all of these issues come in. Theoretically, it can be done, just like what you are going to be seeing in Port Harcourt Refinery now. So I don't know if that answers your question. It can be done theoretically, but is it feasible commercially and everything else?
So should we keep our hopes of for December for the Port Harcourt Refinery?
I'll address that in a minute. Port Harcourt Refinery, the last time I was there was 2012 when I was on an NNPC federal government committee. At that time, the refinery was operating about 50%, and it was barely operating. The old Port Harcourt Refinery has not operated for 40 years, at least since 1990. Now,
sorry,
that's 30 years.
That's 30 years. The old refinery, the 60,000 barrels, the one was built 60 years ago. No, it was built in 1965, okay? 35 plus 23, 58. That refinery has not operated since 1990, when the new refinery came on. So it's been shut down, but let me go back one stage. When the new refinery was designed, I was project manager throughout, from 85 to 90. We had accommodated the old refinery in the design of the new one. We linked them. We took what we could use in the old refinery, the 60,000 barrels per day, to feed into the new one. The new one is a more complex. How is it more complex? If you put 1 barrel of crude oil into the new one, 50% of it will be petrol, PMS. The old refinery, if you put 1 barrel of crude oil into it, you only get maximum 23-24% of petrol. Shows the complexity. The old refinery has just 1 conversion unit that can produce petrol. The new refinery had 4 different conversion units.
That's this one that is being rehabilitated?
No. That is the issue. Why is this old refinery being rehabilitated instead of the new one?
Pause. Right. Are you saying that the one that the federal government is working on right now is the old refinery?
The old refinery was built in 1965 with different old technology. Now, what is being done there, again, from the visual presented by the MD, you probably have a tax of in the last few days, is that they are reconstructing. That is a better word than rehabilitation. When you rehabilitate, equipment is there, you repair it, you rejig it, but when you are reconstructing, every pipe is removed and you put a new one. He mentioned that refineries can be 100 years old. Yes, if you go, I've seen refineries over 100 years old, but when you go there, you will see different units. The one that was 100 years old is no longer used. Next to it are the newer ones. You do not reconstruct 100 or 50-year-old refineries. You put new ones there with newer technology, and it is more difficult what they are doing now than what they shall be done.
So how do you explain the millions of dollars that has been spent on the refineries for turnaround maintenance over the years, and yet we have had no result up until now that we speak?
If I try to explain, it will take me at least an hour. There is a report written by a committee set up by the federal government in 2012. We spent 3 months going through all the refineries to evaluate what's wrong and everything. There is no way we can justify the situation we have today. The refineries were built, the 3 refineries, Warri, Kaduna, and Port Harcourt, were built according to international standards. They were all tested and for completion, and they performed at the time they were completed. They ran according to the design for many years. However, being a government-owned facility, not a private one, they were not run commercially. What does that mean? Monies did not come in time for maintenance. Not enough money actually was given for maintenance, and it was not a profit-organized, project. So it was just declining slowly because of lack of maintenance until it crashed. All of them crashed by 2018.
Are you suggesting that money was budgeted for, but not in all cases was money released?
Correct. You just summarized it for me. When I was MD of Kaduna Refinery, or even Port Harcourt, we will budget to the corporate headquarters. Our budget will be there. Every month, we will receive between 50 and 60% of our budget. You are supposed to make up the rest yourself somehow.
And how were you expected to do that?
Well, you have to be imaginative. When I was in Kaduna Refinery, for instance, it was the only refinery that had a tin and drum manufacturing plant, which is not typically a refinery thing. But we had that plant because we were producing kerosene and we were selling it in tins. So I was selling ordinary tins and drums to people who were buying them for water and other uses to augment the budget for the refinery.
Let's get some practical. Sorry, Bukola.
Yeah.
So the refinery, the Port Harcourt refinery that the federal government is promising to deliver by the end of this year, is the more complex one. Is that what?
No, this is the oldest and what we call hydroskimming. It does not have all the facilities and the processes that the newer one has.
Okay. So what would you have? What's the capacity of this old refinery we're talking about?
60,000 barrels per day. The other half of the refinery, the newer one, which was built 30 years later, is 150,000 barrels per day.
In the same space?
The same, next to each other.
Next to each other.
I told you a few minutes ago, we had, in the design of the new one, we accommodated, we incorporated it. And my first reaction when I heard about this repair was, why are they trying to separate the old one that is 58 years old from the new one?
So what do you think could be the reason?
I will guess. First of all, they wanted to do a quick fix politically. I'm just guessing. Secondly, Dangote Refinery project has been on for a long time. All the governments before that were there since 2014 when Dangote started, well, I've been hoping that Dangote Refinery will come on stream and relieve them of the pressure of the old refineries. So towards the end, I'm saying within the last 2 years, when this rehabilitation was started or was conceived, they preferred to do the old one quickly and say, somebody told them they could fix it quickly and produce. That is wrong. I say it is wrong because the original contractor of the new Port Harcourt refinery refused to participate in this rehabilitation process.
And why is that?
I'm still
because
interested in...
they did not think it was the right way to go.
Can we go back to the issue of funding? You have suggested that money was budgeted for, but not in all cases was money released.
That's for operations.
For operations,
yes.
And for maintenance, I imagine.
Of course,
for maintenance.
Yes.
So who should we begin to ask questions about the measure, the amount of money that was not released, that ought to have been released for maintenance?
Who should you ask? Corporate headquarters of the NNPC?
NNPC.
Because all the refineries were subsidiaries of the NNPC corporate. And the corporate headquarters released money to them. In fact, as you know, the refineries, and I said they're not commercial, when refineries in the NNPC produce the products, they don't sell. They give it to PPMC, the marketing arm. So they don't see money. They only see product going out, and NNPC marketing and corporate headquarters collecting the money. In 1990, we generated products. We were running at about average of 95, 96% throughput in the refineries in Port Harcourt, combined, old and new.
And in the 90s, when you were managing director that you're talking about, we still had issues of fuel scarcity, despite the fact that there was minimal production.
No, I just told you, in 1991, this country was completely self-reliant in products. We did not import any PMS in 1991. The records are there to check.
You also said at some point that we exported petroleum products.
Yes, during that same period, because Port Harcourt Refinery was able to export because we had a jetty that can take out 30,000 tons of products. Warri cannot take out anything because it's only 5,000 capacity to take out, 5,000 tons because of the bar, extravagance bar. Of course, Kaduna is inland. Maybe they export illegally through to Niger and other parts of the north.
Okay, the issue here now is the federal government has made a promise.
Yes.
The issues that my colleague here, Bukola, is asking is, if things went so bad over the years, was to say that this one will not go the same way if we don't address the issues. We'll get to that one, but the question of whether or not the federal government can deliver at the end of this year is still remaining.
Yeah, okay, let me try to answer that. Until I see, no, go back to one stage. Federal government keeps talking about pushing things out. Why can't we listen to the contractor? It's only the contractor that can tell you whether he's going to finish that work end of this month. That work is not being done by Port Harcourt Refinery management. It's being done by a contractor. They awarded a contract of $1.5 billion 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. So the first person, when you are in doubt, is to ask the contractor to speak. Let us see a report of the contractors. We haven't seen that. If we had the opportunity, as I told you, in October, to go there, I could answer some of your questions in more detail. But I'm only using the fact of the video clip released 2 days ago. Now, let's go back to that. I told you, from what I've seen there, it is a reconstruction of an old refinery. It is not just rehabilitation. They're putting in new equipment, and all the pipes, the old ones are being replaced.
And the capacity will remain the same.
And the capacity has to remain the same because they have not expanded it.
Okay, just now, a quick one.
Yes,
okay.
Hold on. One of the concerns that I have is that unlike what we did in 1985 to 1989, when we combined the old and the new, we combined all the different pipes and systems to make it one refinery of 210,000 barrels per day. That was the capacity. Now, this process is to extract 60,000 alone. So that's a problem. Okay.
Just a quick one before we go to Abuja. My colleagues also have questions for you.
Yes.
There is also this vexed issue of modular refineries. The government at some point decided that, look, while we're waiting for these big refineries, the Port Harcourt, Warri, and Kaduna to come on stream, can we have modular refineries produce products for the country, PMS, diesel, AGO, Jet A1, and all of that? And then just yesterday we saw a report that says that a good number of those licenses are still lying fallow, dormant. What do you think is responsible for that?
Well, these licenses were awarded on a different basis completely, not to produce those products.
Really?
That's correct. Because even the 4 or 5 that have been completed out of the 59 in that publication, not a single one of them produce those 5 products. What are the 5 products standard in the refinery? LPG, kerosene, petrol, diesel, and fuel oil. Those are the 5 standard products. All these modular refineries will only produce maximum part of this. The only one they produce in any appreciable quantity that can be used locally is diesel. And the history is that most of the ones that are producing did not start to produce for the public. They started to use the diesel for their own consumption because they produce crude oil. And they could not get diesel for their machines at cheap rates. So they said, I have crude oil. Let me put a small unit modular refinery here, make some diesel for myself. If I have any extra, I sell to the public. That's what Aradel did, Niger Delta. That was the first one done by Chief Adams, who was a past MD of NNPC. So all the modular refineries you see today produce, let me tell you what they produce. They produce, at best, with the 5 of them, at best, some kerosene. And when I say some kerosene, I mean 1 truck a day. They produce naphtha. And the naphtha is a very important intermediate product in producing petrol. Naphtha by itself cannot be put in a car to run because it will knock. So naphtha is a feedstock for petrochemical plants. Europe is short of naphtha. So all these modular refineries are producing naphtha from our crude oil and collecting that naphtha and exporting it for profit. And maybe a little bit of naphtha for your plastic industry in Nigeria.
Why not produce petrol from them?
They do not have the units.
The capacity.
No, not capacity. The units. A refinery is made up of several units, I just told you. None of them has the same unit as the old refinery.
So why is the NMDPRA, I believe that's the issuing authority for licenses, issuing licenses for these products rather than what we need at home for domestic consumption? Good question.
There's absolutely no reason for that. And the way they have hoodwinked in the past is that 20 years ago, most of those 40 refinery licenses were given on the basis that we want to build a refinery, okay? But we need some money. It's a big investment. Give us crude oil. Give my company crude oil to export. But I have to prove to you that I want to build a refinery. I'll do a feasibility study. One small feasibility study which says blah, 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 blah. And on the basis of that, they are giving the license. They are giving some crude allocation. They export and never build a refinery.
Oh, dear.
Well, some of them, when they now build a small refinery, it's only to make naphtha and diesel.
Just to export.
Just to export.
Okay. Abuja wants to come in now. Go ahead, guys.
Okay, Chairman, you're going to ask a question.
Yeah, Mr. Goodway, good morning and good to see you. So first on this modular refinery question, because there was a gentleman who was on one of our sister programs and he spoke about the viability of modular refineries, and the ED of NCDMB, Engineer Obote, has spoken up saying, well, they are indeed viable. He went on and spoke about Walter Smith, how much they pay, the dividend and the equity stake that they do have. Now, concerning whether or not modular refineries can produce petrol, as presently as it stands, you've talked about, yes, they can come up with naphtha, they can come up with diesel, but they don't have the, I think you spoke about a certain component to produce petrol. Now, what is it that they need to do to produce petrol?
Well, you started by talking about viability. For the private investor, if they can make profit with what they have, they are satisfied with that. By exporting naphtha and fuel oil, it makes their project viable for them, but they are not satisfying the requirements of the country. So if the modular refineries must produce petrol, they must have a platform, a reforming unit, and fluid catalytic cracking unit, hydrocracking unit. All of these are in the Dangote refinery. Most of it are in the NNPC refineries that are not working. So not a single modular refinery has a reforming unit. Without a reforming unit, you cannot produce petrol. Even the NNPC project going on in Port Harcourt now, the petrol they're going to produce there, if we're going to use the old plant as it was, they will need lead to increase what we call the run to 91 to make the products. They cannot make the specifications
without using lead. And lead has been banned in this country and many parts of the world as an ingredient for petrol. So you can see why I was talking earlier on to say that the old refinery the new refinery should have been rehabilitated before the old one, because that's where they can make the products and make them in a commercial way. 20%, 25% of petrol on crude is not viable anymore. Not to talk about not making the correct specifications. That refinery was built 60 years ago for a different specification of products. They have improved new technology to reduce air pollution, water pollution. If you look on CNN every day and see the weather forecast, Lagos has number 5 worst air pollution on that program every day. Kaduna, Abuja has 4. And it's all the result of the pollution coming from the Niger Delta and from Lagos, from all our, what do you call it, generators. That's the problem with pollution.
So if I could ask you, from the information you have about what is going on at the moment with the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt Refinery, can we meet the target, or what do you see playing out by the end of this year in terms of it coming back on stream?
Let me continue to predict. I have not been there. We tried to be there on the 5th of October. We plan to go there as chemical engineers. 1 hour before we were supposed to go there, our visit was cancelled. We could not visit the place. So I cannot tell you for sure. I can only talk on the basis of what I've seen. What they are doing there now, let me predict. If what I hear from that short 9-minute release by the MD of the refinery, at best, they will have some kind of mechanical completion by the end of December, because he said they are 75% done overall, but 98% done on procurement and some other issues. But by the end of December, at best, they will have mechanical completion. Then they will do testing of each equipment and systems. You test one equipment, you see how it fits with another one, then you put everything together as a system. The system test may take, I don't know, anything for two weeks or 1 month before you can start, in my opinion, based on what is seen. I have not been there. I don't think it can be done more within 2 or 3 months. Now, what you will get there again is like the old refinery of 60 years ago with just new equipment. The capacity is still 60,000 barrels per day. It will produce less than 30% of the new refinery in Port Harcourt. Less than, in fact, I would say about maybe...
Yeah, but
yes.
I thought they said that if refineries are built in modules, it can go from 1,000 barrels per day to 100,000 barrels per day. If they are built in modules, they can expand that way. Is that right?
That's correct. But when you say modules, modules of what? Process units. I just mentioned to you, certain units must be there. A reformer, fluid catalytic cracker, or hydrocracker. These units, these important units, are what they call the conversion units, to convert the crude oil to the finished products in an, very, should I say, best scenario. I gave you the example. The oil refinery that is being repaired now cannot produce more than 25% maximum on crude oil. In other words, 1 barrel of crude will produce maximum of 25% of petrol. Whereas Port Harcourt Refinery, the new one, which is next door to the old one they are repairing, can produce up to 48 or 50% on crude oil. You put 1 barrel of crude oil, half of it is producing petrol. This one now is, you put on crude oil, only 1/4 of it is producing petrol. And it is a smaller smaller capacity. So overall, I don't expect any appreciable contribution. That is even if all the systems work. I don't have confidence in that right now, to be frank with you, from what I've seen. If I visit the plant...
If I may come in here.
Yes, please.
So this matter of the refineries, let's look at the outcome or the byproducts that are supposed to come from all of this refining that we have. One would think that, I mean, if we say, going by the cost of crude oil right now, say $80 per barrel, the byproducts that come from that refining could give us almost 100% profit, over 100% profit from the byproducts that come from refining these products. Now, if the authorities and those that know, and you're one of those that know that there are byproducts that can fetch the economy more income or that can fetch the country more revenue, shouldn't we be rushing to fix our refineries as they should so that it can give us what we need? I mean, you managed the refinery when it was running at 100%, and you said you could push it to 110. Shouldn't we be pushing for this?
Look, let me remind you, when you are talking about byproducts, I don't really know what you mean. I just gave you that a refinery that takes crude oil to refine it has 5 standard products. And that is if you have all the conversion units in place. All our modular refineries have only one topping unit. They don't have conversion units. That's why they cannot make PMS or petrol. Is that clear? Now, let's go to the new Port Harcourt.
I do understand you. Okay, so let's step back a bit.
Yes.
What byproducts beyond the PMS and fuel and diesel, I mean, beyond the PMS and diesel and naphtha, what other byproducts come from refining?
None. 0. A refinery produces only those 5, and they use fuel from those 5 to run itself. No other products are produced in the refinery.
So at the end,
in a standard refinery, I'm not talking of modular refineries. Okay, let me clear one issue. When you call a refinery modular, it means instead of building it from the ground, you build modules and you transport it to the location. That's the only... Modular is a definition of construction method, not the refinery configuration.
Perhaps what my colleague is talking about is the petrochemical products that are supposed to come out of it.
Aha. In a refinery, there are some refineries which they are called petrochemical refineries, where you manufacture part of the crude oil, when I say part of the food, and you produce naphtha. Okay? Naphtha is a component from a refining process that can be, as I told you, can be sent to a petrochemical refinery as feedstock. But in a normal refinery, that naphtha is processed further in a unit, a conversion unit, which we call reformer. It reforms the naphtha into PMS. And the PMS that comes from that is almost 90%.
Well, you know, so many issues to raise with you now.
Absolutely, Ayo. So many to unpack.
We just gotta have to.
I am trying not to
sound technical.
Well, not too technical. I'm also trying not to imagine what the other people who are doing the work are thinking. But I told you clearly that the work they are doing in Port Harcourt Refinery today should have been done on the new part, not the old refinery.
Okay.
That's another question.
Absolutely.
Why would they make that choice?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, let's just hope that maybe being the former managing director of the Port Harcourt Refinery, maybe you get a call to come assist one way or the other in all of these things. I know you're not looking for political appointment.
No, not only that.
Your expertise
the Society of Chemical Engineers offered. Okay. We offered to go there on the 6th of October, 2 months ago, to go and see what is being done there and give some
professional advice.
Let's hope that
there were 3 past MDs of the Port Harcourt Refinery in that group. But we didn't have that opportunity.
Let's hope that this time around you will get that opportunity. Engineer Alex Ogedegbe is former managing director of the Port Harcourt and Kaduna Refineries. He's also a former GD of the NNPC. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're welcome.
Truly appreciate it. Well, some of your own contribution to the program this morning. Let's begin with yours, Shom Ayuba Dang, who says the federal government should put in financial and human resources 100% for these refineries to deliver to the expectations of Nigerians, because Nigeria cannot wait to see these refineries work. It has taken a long time.
Indeed, it has. And George Akpambo says, the Kaduna tragedy is one too many, and people should be held accountable for such things if we're ever serious to get things right. May the souls of the victims rest in peace. Nyota.
One from Johnson Agogo, and it's an email. He says, I have watched with dismay how fake drugs outlets have increased in the country in recent times. For instance, these days you find both in your urban cities and rural communities fake drug outlets being owned and managed by unregistered nurses and other so-called medical professionals, which has caused untold hardship and danger to unsuspecting Nigerians. The authority concerned should take action to stop the trend.
And then Pastor Law Alpha says, sponsoring as many as 400 delegates for COP28 in the midst of this harsh economic realities cannot be justified on the altar of qualifying to host future conferences of this nature. The political class should understand the level of suffering. And we also did see your message, Engineer Wabote. He says that contrary to what was said over the weekend, he never said that modular refineries are currently producing PMS. He says that, yes, those modules and capacity have got to be built before they can be produced, and that they are viable and are producing. So we get all of that. Well, there you go. That is the show today. We do thank you all for your messages. We'll see you again next time. I'm Chamberlain Asov. Goodbye.
And I'm Neo Taigbe. Bye-bye.
I'm Bukola Koka. Thank you for watching.
And I'm Ayamakide. Have a productive day.
Wow! The citadel of morality, learning and academic excellence, and the oldest college in Igbo land, and indeed the southeast of Nigeria, Methodist College Uzuakoli, announces the celebration of 100 years of a modest doorway passed by thousands of worthy human beings. Whoa, this is great. The college invites you to be part of the Centennial Festival and discover how 1923 was the start of something new. This milestone celebration, which will span a year, starts with the college's biennial homecoming on the 9th of December and a Thanksgiving service at the college chapel at 9:30 a.m. on the 10th of December 2023. Old boys and girls of the college above the age of 80 will be specially honored at the service. This special day will also witness the unveiling of a physical model of the proposed infrastructure of the new Methodist College Uzuakoli. The Governor of Abia State, His Excellency Dr. Alex Oti, ably supported by the President of Uzuakoli Methodist College Old Boys Association Umkober, Mazi Ugochukwu Okorafu, and the Methodist Archbishop of Umuahia, the Most Reverend Chibuzo Poko, will flag off the year-long celebration with a tree planting event to mark the event, and in the support of the biodiversity. Long live Uzumeko, long live Umkober, long live the Methodist Church of Nigeria. Signed, Dr. Chima Bobegu, Chairman, Centenary Media and Publicity Committee.